singing his song. All the little birds on Jaybird Street love to hear the robin go tweet, tweet.
Welcome to Life is Good. I'm Heather McEwen, your ever-loving hostess, and guess who we have today? You've seen me excited on other shows, but this is going to be a spectacular interview, I hope, because we're talking with an enormously popular and information-driven pilot from American Airlines. His name is Captain Steeeve. And hi, Captain Steeeve.
Hi. Hi, Heather. How are you?
I've never been better, thank you. You know, when I'm talking aviation, I'm a happy camper.
Apparently, I need to keep you around to introduce me more often.
Anytime. Yep. Anytime at all. Anyway, Captain, you're here, and I'm going to tell the people a little bit more about you. You have a fantastic YouTube channel. We all watch it if we have anything to do with aviation. You not only talk to us with humor and warmth, you educate us, whether we're laymen or in the profession.
Yeah.
And how did you start the YouTube channel? What was on your mind then?
Well, my son is my producer, and he's a professional filmmaker. He's located in the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina area, and he's been at that for about a dozen years. About 13 years ago, he and I started the YouTube channel because he produced a film called In My Seat. And In My Seat is about my 9/11 story, my background about how I was originally scheduled to be the co-pilot on the first airplane that was hijacked on September 11th. And he released that film onto YouTube, and the channel got monetized, but it was only that one film, and we really didn't do much with the channel. And about 8 months ago, he said, "Hey, Dad," he said, "when you go to work," he said, "why don't you get your phone out and make some little videos about what you do?" So I started making little 60-second videos on, this is an airplane, and these are the wings, and these are the tires. And, I thought they were kind of just toss away things, and no pun intended, but the videos took off. How do you steer a big old jumbo jet on the ground? Let me show you how. And one thing led to another. We started adding subscribers on both TikTok and YouTube. And now, we're about 8 months into it. It's a full-time job. I'm making videos every day, short and long videos. And we're at about 372,000 subscribers, and we add about 1,500-ish subs a day. It's really been kind of a thrill.
Well, I hope the 6 people who watch my show subscribe to your station. Actually, this is going on YouTube also, and we're going to be pushing your channel throughout this entire interview because I think it's an important source for information for everyone. Yeah. And I love the way you deliver your messages. Let's talk a little bit about the commonalities among airline personnel, no matter what job you have. Everyone says, "Oh, yeah, you work for an airline. How fabulous. How exciting." Yeah. So what we do have in common is flexibility. What other values do you see that, not values, but what other,
Well, it's like qualities or traits that you have to have. I mean, it's not for everybody. If you don't like living out of a suitcase and you don't like jet lag and you don't like, traveling, then this is probably not the occupation for you. Some people, they love the routine of getting up and going to work and being in a cubicle at 9 o'clock and being done by 4:30 and, the precision of that. The airlines aren't like that at all. The idea, when I was looking for a job way back when, the idea of me actually having to punch a time clock and be in an office just seemed like torture. And so my job is never the same thing twice. Although I fly the same airplane every time, I'm always going to someplace different. And if I'm not, it's always a different crew that I'm working with and a different experience every time. So I love the variety, and I don't mind the travel. I don't mind living out of a suitcase. I find that kind of fun, even at my advanced age. I still am enjoying all that. What's that?
Yeah, well, I agree with you 100%. You have to be flexible, you have to be willing, and you have to be, no matter what, good with people. And what I've noticed about you in some of your videos is that you always respect the flight attendant, and you use TEM, which is the integration of every crew member to work together, team building, etc. And why don't you give us an example of how you welcome people aboard?
Well, when I do my my PA, it's a little bit different. I don't do any more PAs than a normal captain, but when I do, I always introduce my crew, and I tell everybody, I say, I personally handpicked this crew for this flight, which isn't true, but it sounds good. And but I handpicked them due to their.
Something to say about that.
Yeah, I handpicked them due to their fabulosity. And then I make a joke that that's a word I just made up, but they are absolutely fabulous, and you're going to experience that great service from them. It just puts everybody in a good mood, and I think one of the things I want to try to do is I think passengers on airplanes naturally are kind of nervous about the whole experience. And if they can connect with the captain on the airplane, or the captain has a little bit of a personality, that is reassuring to them. And so I want to make that connection. The first one I do is on that first PA. The last thing I do before I sign off is I introduce my co-pilots. And if it's two guys I'm working with, I always introduce them as Brad Pitt and George Clooney,
If you don't
which is
mind,
kind of fun.
if I'm on your plane, could you introduce one as Mick Jagger?
Sure. If you
Just
like
for me.
Mick Jagger, we can do that. If you want to be Julia Roberts, we can introduce you that way. I mean, it's fun. It's good fun. Everybody
It's
gets the
wonderful.
humor in it. Yeah.
I'm sure they love that. I know in the old days, I wasn't flying in the old days. I wasn't even hired by an airline until I was 52.
Yeah.
I had about 53 rejections between the ages of 18 and 22 because I was too short to be a flight attendant in the old days. So JetBlue finally hired me, and it was my last chance. And incredible experiences every single day. But in the old days, as I recall, the pilots, I was always a customer on a plane in those days. Pilots and flight attendants there was no communication to speak of. The pilots were gods.
Yeah, prior to 9/11, there was probably a little bit more communication, but after 9/11, it really dried up just because the getting in and out of the door to the flight deck became much more difficult. So the pilots didn't go back as often. The flight attendants they don't anymore come up and sit down and just chat because it's too difficult to do that. So we did lose a big dynamic in terms of the team, work of the whole thing after 9/11. But you're right. It is two separate work groups in many ways. And on occasion, on a layover, I'll go out with some of the flight attendants. It's always fun when we do. I always really enjoy it. But the pilots tend to gravitate to the pilots, and the flight attendants tend to gravitate to the flight attendants.
To interrupt, that might be true socially, but what's better is the fact that pilots and flight attendants have to have them pre-flight briefing so they find out which
Correct.
page they're all on. There's an open communication in order that if there is an incident,
Yes.
everyone will work as a team. And getting to know your pilot a little bit, getting to know your flight attendant a little bit, anything like that, it just opens up great communication in case of something going wrong. And your personality would be one of the pilot personalities I'd like to fly with because you're warm,
Yeah.
you're intelligent, you're open, and I would not be afraid to call you and say, hey, excuse me, this doesn't seem to be right back here.
Correct. And I always respect
you.
everybody I work with, right?
It shows.
Yeah.
It definitely shows.
That's
And,
hugely important because we're all professionals, highly trained professionals, and we ought to treat each other with utmost respect.
Well, I was always treated with respect, and I appreciate the present day way of flying because I think that's true. Going back to your origins in aviation, you were a naval aviator flying P-3s.
Yep.
That's a little bit different than a Boeing 777 Series 300.
It's a little bit. I loved that airplane. It
why?
was the old Lockheed Electra. It's a 4-engine turboprop, and we hunted submarines. And it was the best of the old world of aviation. The autopilot didn't work very well, so you hand flew the airplane all the time. So my skills got really good. But it was a very versatile airplane. The mission was wonderful. I loved everything about that airplane, and it was a great transition into the airlines because it's a larger airplane. It doesn't land on the boat or the ship. Sorry,
It's only 300
so
feet above
it's
the water.
land based. Yeah, and many times you're 200 feet up over the open ocean, which was awesome.
You could practically drop a line and do some fishing. But
could.
Amelia Earhart, her plane was an Electra.
Yeah,
And-
that's right.
Oh, what a beautiful thing that is. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Do you ever go to any of the airplane museums? There's one in Ottawa that I think has an Electra.
I have. One of my best friends is the CEO of the museum, the Naval Museum down in Pensacola, Florida. So I head down there frequently.
Oh, I'm hooked on that stuff. Now, I had another question. You were, let's see, there's a difference between an Air Force pilot and a naval aviator. And as we've talked about that probably for many reasons, what are your major differences that you describe
Well, when you start to get, some Air Force fellas and I say fellas, I mean guys and gals in the same room together, it gets kind of heated, the difference between the two. I'm a designated naval aviator. I'm actually not a pilot. The Air Force puts out pilots. The Navy puts out designated naval aviators. If you want to get into the nuances of that, it gets pretty out of control, especially in a social situation. But the primary difference is this. In the Navy, you ask for forgiveness, and in the Air Force, you ask for permission. So the Air Force pilots were always trained that they can't do anything unless they get it cleared on the 12 levels of bureaucracy above them and then back down to them. The Navy guys were just kind of trained to adapt and overcome. If you go out there and you see it needs to be done, use your best judgment. And if it doesn't work out well, you might get in trouble. If not, if it does work out well, then good on you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think common sense should override any kind of bureaucracy myself.
That's why I gravitated to the Navy. I'm more of a forgiveness guy than a permission guy, if that makes sense.
Bless your heart. I think you should be. Anyway, let's see. I keep looking at my notes. I don't want to miss anything because I've got tons of questions and tons of things from your videos because they're all so good. Folks, if you're watching this show, check out the little tab because you'll access the wonderful YouTube station that Captain Steeeve drives. You've got 8 children, for heaven's sakes.
8, yes. Yeah.
And, it's people often wonder, how do you manage family life with aviation? And after you get some seniority, it's easy.
Yeah, the seniority helps out a little bit. But when the kids were younger, I bid reserve at the airline, which meant I was on call to fill in. I'd get paid a set salary, and I worked about half as much. And so that gave me a lot of time to be at home and be a dad. The other thing about the aviation business is you can't take work home with you. And so when I was home, I was completely home. It wasn't like I was working on a report or saying, kids, you got to stay out of the room. Dad's doing something on the computer. I was completely there when I was at home. So, it worked out. The kids are pretty well balanced. And I tell everybody, none of them are incarcerated. So I think we did a pretty good job.
I think you did. And I congratulate you for that because that's not easy even when you're home. Well, I was home all the time when my children were growing up. So I screwed them up all by myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good fun.
They're 43 and 45 now. And thank goodness, and they live close to me. So I'm so grateful. But it was a wonderful way to raise children when I was home. But I didn't become a flight attendant till they were far gone.
Yes.
Let's see. You had a terrifying close call when you were an aviation aviator in the Navy, when you came close to the end of the runway at one point. Right.
I think that's one of the videos I put together, and people are always asking me, they ask me several questions. The biggest one is, have you ever been scared in an airplane? And at the airlines, the answer is no, not really. It's pretty routine at the airlines, at least not yet so far. But in the Navy, there was a couple episodes. One was that night we were doing workups to go on deployment. So you practice like for real. You put real bombs on the wings. You fill up the airplane with gas. We were going to fly out a couple of hours over the ocean, do our mission, and then practice mission training, and then come back. The weather was really bad. What's that? It was in Maine,
right?
Yeah, it was out of Maine. And if you lived up in the Northeast, you know what a nor'easter is. And a nor'easter was just starting to come through, which sometimes a nor'easter can be as bad or worse than a hurricane. And we took off in this kind of bad weather, couldn't get out into the operating area because of the bad weather, had to turn around early and come back. And then the decision process was, I've learned from that. I probably should have gone someplace else, but we came back to Brunswick, Maine, where I was based. We kind of came in bad weather, made a landing on a runway that the wind was whipping and the rain was whipping. And I touched down on the runway and the airplane began to hydroplane. So if you've ever been on black ice in a car, it's that same feeling of you're doing this and not much is happening. And the airplane was starting to slide off the side of the runway. Every time I pulled the engines into reverse, it slid even more. I started to apply the brakes just to get the airplane stopped, and they weren't doing anything. And it was like a really bad movie, where the guy's going down the canyon and his brakes aren't working. And I remember being about 2,000 feet before the end of the runway because my co-pilot yelled out 2,000 feet remaining. And we were still doing about 110 knots, I think, of speed on the ground. And I remember I just threw up an arrow prayer real quick, and I said, "Oh Lord, help me stop this airplane." And I hit the brakes one last time, and they took. And the airplane's kind of sideways. It's a big tricycle anyway, and it started bounce, 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 bounce. It finally came to a stop, and the nose of the airplane was off the end of the runway, but the wheel, the actual front tire, is actually a little bit behind the pilots. It was still on the concrete.
Oh my God.
And that's about as close as you can get.
Yeah, and what did the ATC ask you at that point?
So we just sat there, and everybody kind of took their headsets off, and we were just sitting there listening to the engines run, reflecting on the moment we just had. And then the tower calls up and says, "Hey, flight, you gonna taxi off the runway?" I said, "Yeah, we're having a moment here. Just give us a minute. We'll taxi off the runway." So they had no clue what had gone on, and the people in the back of the airplane had no clue. It was just the flight crew. We kind of all shared that moment that night.
That's a good one to share. Any landing you can walk away from, right?
Yeah, we walked away from that one, but I can't imagine if we'd gone off the end of the runway with all those bombs hanging on the wings, it turned out very well.
I know. That would not have been good at all.
Nope.
Chances are they would have got a refund on that ticket.
Yep, probably.
I have a question. Let's see. You had a leadership course that you made yourself.
Yes.
You created this course yourself when you were a naval aviator. Leadership course, and it was character driven.
Yes.
Our airline and most airlines have what they call values. You're pretty much quizzed on those when you're in the hiring process, so they know you're a good character. At JetBlue, it was safety, caring, integrity, passion, and fun. And if we made any decisions based on any of those values, the company backed us.
Right.
Like if I decided I was going to burst into song, like when we were going through turbulence, I burst into song like "You Never Fly Alone," and I belt out a hymn, changing the words to make my customers feel good. I was never fired for that. That was a fun-based, passion-based decision, Heather. So you're okay.
Yes.
And they complain about my singing. Anyway, that was good. But when you did the leadership course, I wish I'd taken it because yours went even deeper than that, didn't it?
Yeah, I was asked to write this course. Some sailors had some difficulty, and one of the guys I worked for, a captain, said he knew my background and so forth. I've got a master's degree in counseling, and I have a earned doctorate. I wrote on the role of parents and the character development of children. So it was really kind of the role of leadership in character development. And so he knew that background. He asked me to write a class, and he was going to send some people to it. And that's all it was going to be. And so I put this course together, and he sent some people to it, about 6 people, and they loved it. And he decided to do it again, and we did it a 3rd or 4th time. And then as people were writing out their post-course critiques, in the military, if you ever turn it over and write on the back, it's usually just a scathing report about how horrible it was and don't ever let this happen to me again. But people were turning it over and writing it on the back, but they had a different response. They all replied, "This was the best course I've ever been to. Is there any way to make it longer? Can I come back again? And can I bring my family members with me next time?" Mm-hmm. So we were onto something. And long story short, it grew over the years. I put about 25,000 sailors through that course in the course of teaching it for, I don't know, almost 18 years as a reserve officer and then as a civilian. But then the pandemic came along, and the pandemic killed a lot of things, and I haven't been invited to teach the course since the pandemic.
Well, I don't want it to go to waste, so I certainly hope you're invited back.
Me too. I love teaching it.
Yeah, well, the pandemic certainly did change things. I stopped working at JetBlue because of the pandemic, and things happen for a reason. So I'm very well installed in my little village of Newport City, Vermont, and happy as a clam, actually, but I do miss the camaraderie. And more than that, I miss the experience of hearing the stories that my customers tell me, because I always say the same thing. I've got wrinkles. People tell me everything.
Right.
And gosh, I wish I'd taken your leadership course. It would have been so good. Let's cut through a couple of things that really bother people, both in the cockpit and down below, because we're hit with some of the conspiracy theories from those on the ground about chemtrails. Would you please explain what chemtrails might be?
Chemtrails are probably the imagination child of somebody who's either living in their mom's basement or spending too much time on the internet, or both. Chemtrails are not a thing. What happens airplanes at altitude, there's moisture in the air, just like there's moisture in the air down on the ground. And you notice that when you put ice cubes in a drink and it begins to sweat on the outside of the glass, it's called condensation. So that process is just sped up at altitude when a jet engine, which is burning at, I don't know, it's like 1,500 degrees Celsius on the inside of the engine. That heat comes out the back of the engine, and whatever little moisture is in the air is gathered towards the end of the engine, and then it's made into water droplets, and then it almost instantly refreezes again into these little bitty ice particles that are so small that they just float like a cloud, and that's where you get the trail out the back of the airplane.
Yeah.
So when people see that, they either think it's smoke, or then the chemtrail guys get crazy with it's some switch I flip and I'm chem seeding the planet for some reason. There's no consensus on what the reason is, because it's not a real thing.
Well,
it's just ice crystals in the air.
Whenever I see anybody wearing a tinfoil hat, I say, I bet they believe in chemtrails.
Yeah, probably. And there's probably people I fly with that believe in the chemtrail thing, but there's no it's not a thing.
There's no fact in that. And
None.
something that used to
None.
really bother us as flight attendants were emotional support animals. And you have a theory on that, which I disagree with, by the way. I don't really think we should have emotional support animals just automatically put on planes, but emotional support animals drive us crazy because
Right.
people
Well,
don't really have emotional support animals. They just don't want to pay for putting them under the seat or any other way.
yes,
Or they want a
I'm
Fido to sit on their lap or something.
I'm with you on that interpretation of it for sure. And, I have kind of a snarky sense of humor. So I thought, let's be proactive with the pet thing. It's become a real problem for the airlines and
Oh, it
for
has.
people and for other passengers. And so I thought, I just as a joke started saying to my coworkers, I got an idea. I think we ought to supply the emotional support pet, ban people from bringing their own, but we'll supply it. And you get one of those little mini golden doodle dogs that's hypoallergenic and it doesn't shed and it just wants to be petted all the time. And they're just so cute and loving. And you based on the size of the airplane, you get 2 or 3 of them and they just walk up and down the aisles and people can pet them. And now, the marketing campaign goes like this. You're a business person, you've had a bad day, your deal got turned down, your tie is loosened, you're disheveled, you walk onto the airplane, you've had a bad day, you sit in the seat, and here comes little Daisy walking up, and she puts her head on your lap, and you pet Daisy, and all of a sudden your countenance rises, and you're having a great day, and it's all because of it. At our airline, we supply the emotional support pet for you.
That's
And
right.
And so it started out as a joke, but I've had a few people that go, hey, you know what? That's not half a bad idea.
But then the flight attendants would have to take care of them, or you'd have to hire animal caregivers, which is great. It would employ more people.
But Heather, here's the most brilliant part of that idea. It cuts down on sick time at the airline, and here's how. Let's say you're wanting to take an emotional, mental day off, right? You're not really sick, but you just don't want to go to work, and so, but you think, you know what? I wonder what airplane I'm flying. So you look up online what airplane you're going to take on the first leg of your trip, and you name the airplane after the emotional support pet that's attached to it. So just like JetBlue has a name on the side of the airplane, right? And Virgin does the same thing.
This is David Neeleman.
Yes, the airplanes are now named after the main emotional support pet. So let's say your jet that day is Daisy, and you go, oh, I love Daisy. I haven't seen Daisy in a long time. Well, I'm not calling in sick. I'm going to go to work because I want to see Daisy. It's brilliant. It cuts down on sick time. People love it. I should get paid for this idea.
Well, I think you probably should, but I have see if that. Well, if that
What's your
doesn't happen.
theory?
My theory: every flight attendant is an emotional support person,
Yes.
and people don't need to bring four-legged fuzzy things that are noisy or yappy or just terrible to have on an aircraft. Even though I love dogs, love cats,
Yes.
don't want them on my plane. Just talk to a flight attendant. Just come to us and say, I'm afraid, or I'm going
Yes.
through a divorce, or I'm in some cases I'm taking my son off life support when I get to New York because he was in a motorcycle accident.
Right. There's people that, like you said, they are traveling that have real things going on in their lives.
Everybody does, and they're either going to a relative they don't want to see, or they're going to a funeral, or they're going to a job they don't want, or they're on a business trip and they had to leave their brand new baby. Every single customer on a plane, every single one of them is there for a reason, and not all of them are good.
Yes.
In fact, I'd say the majority are really stressful, especially they have to get to the airport, park a car, realize they have to pay for parking, then they have to get their ticket at any kiosk, button, and then go through TSA, and then finally get to the gate, and we change the gate. Everything happens. These poor customers, they're put through the mill before they get on our planes. And so
Correct.
When you stand out there and you introduce yourself as the captain, they immediately de-escalate.
Yeah, correct. That's correct.
And so I thank you so much for that, because I know you do that, and it's a wonderful thing. And then we'll talk about that too. I hope I can get you back on here. There's so much to talk about. But what the thrust of it, when I emailed you to ask if you'd be on the show, I said, would you be willing to discuss the FAA and some of its issues, aging out, for instance, or ATC, the aging out, lack of staff, new contract, which we might not discuss, the fact that FAA doesn't always implement NTSB recommendations, which I didn't know.
Correct.
I watch Mayday, Mayday. I watch all these other shows that talk about, because this happened on this particular incident, the FAA has been informed by the NTSB that changes will be made.
Right.
So I just took it for granted. So please, would you talk first about aging out?
Yeah, so aging out is something that started, there didn't used to be a pilot retirement age until 1960. The CEO of a large airline in this country was best friends with the head of the FAA. They were golfing buddies. And one day they were out, and he was complaining to his friend about that the pilots over age 60 made more money than he was. And that kind of bothered him. And so he and his buddy came up with a plan. And the plan was, let's introduce the first ever pilot retirement age. So they went to Congress and said, hey, let's codify this. Let's make it a law. And so aviation or commercial pilots are the only non-government job in the country that has a mandatory retirement age. There are ones within the government, but this is the only non-government one. So over the years, that age 60 became, people figured there was some reason behind it, right? Because reasonable people go, well, there must be some real reason behind that. And there wasn't. It was just a backroom handshake deal between a CEO and a head of a government department.
That would never happen now, would it?
No. We would we have buildings that we pay $57 million a year to lease and nobody comes to work in them? No. There's somebody, I'm sure, that's responsible, is watching over that, I'm sure. So so over the years, the pilots were timing out at age 60, which really is very young when you think about it. All the most experienced people in the flight deck are now being forced out, being replaced by somebody that's younger, that costs less. That was the whole idea in the first place. Then in the early 2000s, all the airlines, all of them went through bankruptcy, and in the courts, many of them lost their retiree medicals. They were still forced to retire at age 60. They couldn't qualify for Medicare until age 65, and that 5-year gap, they not only had to go out and get another job, but they also had to pay for their own health care. Yeah. So in 2007, George Bush signed age 65 into law. There was no study behind that, none whatsoever. Just made it 65 overnight. And guess what happened? What? Nothing, right? Everybody kept flying. The airplanes were doing fine. It turns out that age 60 was just a made-up number. And it turns out that age 65 was just a made-up number. Why? Because it made a bridge to Medicare. And right now, we're kind of trying to fight that and say, hey, look, I have to pass the same physical. I have to pass the same check rides. I get a physical every 6 months. I have for my entire career. If I'm in good health at age 65, why should I have to be forced to retire? Because one day, I'm the captain of the biggest ship at the biggest airline in the world with all the responsibility that comes for that, with hundreds of lives on the line. And the very next day after my birthday, I can't even get into the airport unless I buy a ticket. And there's something wrong with that.
Totally. And, they didn't even hire me till I was 52. And They don't age out flight attendants. I don't remember being 60. I know I must have been at one point. But
correct.
What's changed in my cognitive reasoning skills, what's changed in my coordination, well, that was always bad. But there are a lot of things that are the same or even improved because of wisdom that comes
correct.
In. The experience that we get in a cockpit or on a flight deck.
Because the major objection that people will raise to pilots retiring or staying on longer is, what about your reaction time? All right. So my answer to them is this: if I was a point guard in the NBA and I needed instant lightning fast reflexes, yeah, I might time out somewhere in my mid 30s, right? I just can't keep up with the younger players and so forth. That's the exact opposite in aviation. I don't want to do anything quickly. I want to slow down. I want to say to my co-pilot, time out. We don't want to cause a secondary problem because we were too hasty to try to get the first one fixed in a hurry. Nothing in an airplane happens in a hurry. It's kind of slow down. Let's take our time. And the experienced, wise, older pilot is the one that is that voice of reason that says, slow down. Let's get this right the first time so we don't cause a second problem.
Right. And there is an organization, and we're going to put that little blurb underneath. These people sponsor one of your shows, but it's called RaiseThePilotAge.com.
Right.
And they're starting a lobby in order to move Congress forward into the countering that aging out process. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's their website, RaiseThePilotAge.com, and it's called Let Experienced Pilots Fly. And they're working in Washington, D.C., where things move slowly, but they're working diligently to help get the pilot age either eliminated or raised to an appropriate level. And so, if your listeners would do that, go to that website, read all about it, support their work, because it really is going to raise the level of safety in our airplanes. We've had a bad couple of months in the news in aviation. And I'm not saying that's age-related necessarily, but
experience counts.
Experience counts. I agree.
And I've got to say, yes, for anybody watching, aviation has had a tough start to 2025.
Yeah. And I say to people when they get on the airplane, if you can see into the cockpit, you don't really care what somebody's skin color is. You don't care what gender they are. What you're looking for is a little bit of gray hair. And if you see gray hair, you're reassured. You go back to your seat, sit back, relax, enjoy the flight. If you don't see any gray hair, are you concerned? Well, it's not as reassuring as gray hair. I can tell you that.
I mind. But I totally get what you're saying, and I agree with you 100% because wisdom comes first. Experience.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just look at the experience. When you watch Mayday or anything, it's not always an end game. You see how pilots pull it off, get straight and level again. They manage to land safely, and that's experience.
Correct.
And you don't usually see the 12-year-olds doing that.
No.
They don't react with the experience required. So,
right.
Folks, if you're watching this and you do see this particular little blurb at the bottom, check it out and call your congressman. We have a few of those, and call.
Yep.
Captain, how many months do you have left before you hit 65?
I have 7 months left. I'll turn 65 in 7 months, and then I'm out unless they change the age.
Well, let's change the age before you leave because the airlines can't afford to lose someone like you.
Yeah, I'm ready to keep working.
That's a spirit. That's a spirit. In Vermont, you're not allowed to retire. If you retire, they just shoot you. We all need about 3 jobs to survive in Vermont.
No kidding.
We have to work fast to keep warm.
Yeah, and pay the government, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Such as it is. Well, I'd like to get a congressman involved in your fight, so I'm going to call my congressman tonight.
Okay, good. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate that.
I appreciate what you do. So let's see what else. Oh, ATC. We have an issue with ATC, not only because they're aging out at 56. There aren't any folks there.
Right. So they age out even younger than pilots do. Their retirement age is age 56. And again, it's the same principle. If they can pass their physicals and their cognitive tests and they can do their job, they get check rides just like we do. If they pass, then they should be able to continue. You want experience in that job. I want them to be experienced.
Most definitely.
That you want me to be experienced because you're in the airplane with me. So experience is invaluable. And again, that's another very similar situation to the pilot forced retirement age. It should be eliminated or at a minimum raised to a reasonable age.
Well, I can't disagree with you on that one. And when you think of pilots being safe, it's a team effort between air traffic control and people in the air. So many times ATC people who can see the big picture can just get a pilot onto the ground when he's got systems that are failing, or when he has some other issue, when they have to divert, when they have to just go in at a different size of an airport. It's ATC that gets them down a lot and clears the air when they're in trouble. And oh my God, I can't give them enough credit.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, and 56, like I said,
Yep.
I don't remember being 60. I sure don't remember being.
Yeah, that's really young.
The systems that you tested in NASA for the industry were
Right.
about the radio usage, and there's an FAA, Federal Aviation Fund, that was started in the 70s. Would you like to talk about that a little bit? I think it's important.
Yeah, so NASA has a great program where they'll hire pilots for the day, and you go in and do experiments on stuff that they're looking to do maybe in the future with aviation. So I did a whole bunch of those experiments with NASA back in the mid 90s. And one of them was a thing called CPDLC, which was it's the controller pilot data link communications. And basically it's just texting. You text a friend, you can text a group, you can text anybody. It's texting back and forth to an airplane. Whatever they want me to do, instead of picking up the radio and calling me, it just pops up on my screen. The neat part about that is there's no language barrier. There's no two airplanes stepping on each other. It's very clear communication. I simply hit a button and accept, and then I go follow their instructions. So that system has been around for a very long time. Most of the overseas countries in Europe and Asia employ it already, and they have for years. But in the United States, we don't. We started it, and then we stopped it, and then we thought about it some more, and then we didn't. And there's this fund called the Airport and Aviation Trust Fund that was started back in, I think, 1970.
It's $9 billion.
Yeah, and there were billions put into it.
Yeah.
And the FAA has just been reluctant to spend the money to upgrade. It was meant to upgrade the system as technology improved. And my illustration is it's like a house that's got a leaky roof. And instead of you replacing the roof and spending the money you need to do it right, you just buy a blue tarp and put over it. Well, that's what they've been doing to aviation for all these years. They've been blue tarping it, and it's in bad shape. And they need to take that money, and my guess is the money's probably not there, but let's assume it is. And they need to upgrade the system to the 21st century, because what we're doing is archaic, and it's patched together and it works, but it could work a whole lot better than it does, and a whole lot safer, I think. And so that's why they need to spend the money.
I agree with you there. And when you say the Europeans have it and the Asians have it, what happens when we fly over there? Are they still using the archaic system to talk with you, or?
It's a little bit of both. My airplane, the Boeing 777, has the CPDLC capability. So I'll leave my airport, I'll fly all the way up, and when I get to Moncton Center up in Canada,
I know
Moncton is the first place that has CPDLC. I log on to their CPDLC, and then for most of the rest of the trip, all the way over to London, it's all texting back and forth to the screen. You talk to a couple of people, but not very many. And so the two airplanes aren't talking over each other, and we're not blocking communications, not trying to get a word in edgewise because there's just too much chatter on the radios. There's so many more airplanes flying today than there were 40, 50 years ago when the radio system was first installed. And we need to upgrade. And so CPDLC is one of many. There's dozens and dozens of technological improvements that could be made, but there has to be the will and the money spent on doing it. And I don't know why they won't.
Who is in charge of the will? Is it?
Well, Heather, where have all the adults gone in the world? That's what I want to know.
Flowers, everyone.
Who's in charge of anything these days? And it's and then when you get somebody that is in charge, everybody they get all crazy about it. And there needs to be more kind of direction with these things and oversight. I don't want to get political, but I'm just aghast with how my money has been spent over the years.
I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, it's shocking. And so everybody should be up in arms about that. And so again, their money could be spent on good things that would improve public safety. I'm all for that. And there's things that are just fluffy, nonsensical things. And I don't know, it seems like everything's backwards. My question is, where are the adults?
I have a question. If you do age out before this law is changed for the 60s, 65-year age, would you go into politics?
No. No, total waste of time. I could do more good not being a politician. The culture is broken beyond repair. And I've thought about it. I thought about it 30 years ago. I got asked that question by a New York Times reporter back in 2000, 25 years ago. And I said, nope, I'd rather be a pastor. I'd rather be a public figure. I'd rather be a YouTube influencer. You can get more done and accomplish more for cultural change than you can as a member of Congress. The system is completely broken, in my opinion.
It's my opinion too. So
Yep.
we agree on that. We agree on that. And you say pastor.
Yes, I was a pastor for 10 years.
Oh, really?
I was. Yeah.
Where?
I started a church up in Brunswick, Maine, or in Topsom, Maine, and I pastored there for 10 years. And then we handed that off to the next guy, and I came down here to continue flying, and now I've become a YouTube influencer of all things. What a shock. My adult kids they're beside themselves. They're apoplectic. The dad, the boomer, has become an influencer.
Yeah, and now I'm under the influence because I
Yeah.
watch you all the time. And I hope that my watchers watch you. We're going to do everything we can to promote you time and again.
Yeah,
because,
it's
everybody
good
has
fun.
questions about the aviation industry, and you just answer them so beautifully. I mean, everybody can understand you.
Yes.
You've got passion, and we
Yes.
need that. Well, what do you want to talk about? You have the floor, sir.
Well, I think we've talked about a lot of stuff. I enjoy what I do for a living. I'm really having fun in the Captain Steeeve business. And, a lot of people ask, okay, so you've been talking about retirement. If you're going to retire in 7 months, does Captain Steeeve on YouTube and TikTok go away? And no, it doesn't. In fact, that's going to become my next job if I'm forced to retire. It has become my next job already. It's my second job now. We'll just have more time to make more Captain Steeeve content, and probably even better. We're going to branch out into talking about military issues and things, and I might get into some of those political things. Although part of the charm of the channel is that you can go there and get away from the political noise of the day and just learn something about aviation or something about flying an airplane, or just have a good chuckle because Captain Steeve's trying to be a little snarky. And it's a family-friendly place. A lot of dads and moms, they sit down with their kids every night and watch the new short that comes out at 5 p.m. So probably stay away from the politics stuff, but we'll try to continue to expand the channel.
I hope you do.
Yep.
And there's so many things we can talk about. When you ever, we're in Maine, and the station is in Newport, Vermont, and we have a wonderful little airport 3 miles from here, EFK.
Yeah.
And it was ground zero during the eclipse last year because we had 96 aircraft land, including 3 jets.
Wow.
And I was working the airport run, getting people back and forth to giving them tour guide information between the airport and Newport, where we had nearly 4 minutes of totality which was the best in the country. And I was so proud of that airport. And
Yeah.
I am so proud of that airport. And my dad and I used to fly in there. I started flying with my dad when I was 11, and he tried every single kind of aircraft, amphibious and you name it. If it was too rough to land on the lake, he'd land at Newport Airport. And so when I go back there now, it's like the spirit of my dad hanging out. And
Sure. Yeah.
And to tell you the truth, all the pilots I've spoken with there have the same thread of that sense of adventure.
Mm-hmm.
They look to the future. They're always looking at new aircraft. But
Right.
there's a 1952 Beaver there from de Havilland. And so we look at the past at that airport. We look at the present. And, I haven't been to any airplane museums in 10 years. But I can go there and I can see the most modern, most technologically perfect aircraft, little one.
Yeah.
And I can go into a hangar and sit in, the cockpit of a Beaver.
Sure. Yeah.
So I get my little hit there. And do you ever fly a little aircraft?
I do. I have a little airplane that I just
Yeah.
purchased a few months ago. It's called a Long Easy. It's an experimental, and it's just a little 2-seater airplane. It's a lot of fun.
What's the average cruising speed on that?
Oh, it's fast. It's a zippy little thing. It cruises out at like 170 knots,
Whoa.
I think.
That's faster than a Moody.
And it sips gas. It gets about 6 gallons an hour.
That's not
And
bad.
so it's a very nice little airplane. Burt Ratton designed it back in the early 80s. and lots of guys have built them. I did not build mine. I just purchased it from somebody who did. But it's a fun airplane.
I'm going to close the show with an invitation to you, Captain Steeeve.
Yes.
Won't you and your wife please fly into EFK in Newport, just outside of Newport, Vermont, someday?
Yeah,
And
we would
I
love
hope
to.
you and I stay in touch, and I hope you stay in touch with the station. And you can come and visit us.
Yeah,
And
love to.
spread that joy, spread the love of aviation, and meet some of the people around here who really respect you, which is just about anybody who's ever seen you. And I thank you so, so much for being on Life is Good today.
Thank you, Heather. My pleasure.
My pleasure. And see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.